and to look at the correlation between schizophrenia and income inequality and poverty. So, schizophrenia is an illness characterized by psychotic symptoms such as hallucinations, delusions, disorganized thoughts, and social withdrawal. It is affecting nearly 1 in every 100 persons, which means that nearly 21 million people worldwide have schizophrenia. As you can see in this demographic, schizophrenia is 6 times more common than diabetes and 2 times more common than Alzheimer's. So it's far more prevalent than we realize. There are 4 main causes of schizophrenia: biological, environmental, biochemical abnormalities, and sociocultural differences. These 3 are important to take note of, but I'm fixating on this one because I'm much interested to see heightened rates of schizophrenia in different socioeconomic groups. So, as you can see in this infographic, as annual income decreases to below $20,000, the rate of annual prevalence of schizophrenia increases. So I looked at a few different studies to explore why. The first study I looked at had a compilation of 21 different studies worldwide between the years of 1950 and 1980, and they were conducted to report the rates of psychiatric disorders according to social class. 6 of the studies were conducted in the United States, and 5 out of 6 of those studies found that the highest rates of psychiatric disorders were indeed in the areas of lowest socioeconomic class. One reason for this might be due to the lack of support available to the lower class. Oftentimes, this will actually lead to the development of various mental illnesses. The second study I looked at was an ecological study of a population in South London. It had similar results to the first study in that they found a strong association between inequality and higher rates of schizophrenia. However, the study only sees an increased rate of schizophrenia in the most deprived areas. So there's no significant effect of inequality overall. Really, it's just focused on really, really impoverished areas. Additionally, the second study also suggests that the disparity might be due to the fact that inequality influences access to services, and because the lower class doesn't have as many access to services, they have a higher rate of schizophrenia. The third study I looked at provides evidence to suggest that socio-environmental factors might increase a risk for schizophrenia. So this study looked at 26 different countries and concluded that countries with a larger rich to poor gap are at a higher risk for schizophrenia. So if we look at the United States, for example, we can see that they have a higher income inequality and also a worse health and social problems. And so if we follow the line of best fit up, we see that the USA has a very strong correlation for income inequality and heightened risk for mental and social problems, specifically schizophrenia. The key takeaway of this NCBI study was that chronic stress associated with living in very deprived societies increases the risk of schizophrenia. So the conclusion is that poverty is a powerful predictor of who might be diagnosed as schizophrenic and what areas and socioeconomic groups are more likely to have higher risk of schizophrenia. And so, as we see here, the lowest socioeconomic status groups have 8 times more of a risk for developing schizophrenia than those of the highest socioeconomic statuses. So, based off of these facts, it seems likely that living in poverty does predispose people to schizophrenia. However, based off of the studies that we just went over, it also seems safe to assume that income inequality causes chronic stress around living in poverty, and therefore the stress places individuals at a risk of developing schizophrenia. So, what can we do to break this cycle? Unfortunately, our social structure is a bit set in the ways, and so we need to rely on efforts that are working to help the homeless and the mentally ill population. So one way to do this is assertive community therapy approach, which works with the severely mentally ill who are at risk of a psychotic break, hospitalization, or incarceration, And this form of therapy works directly with these individuals to make sure that they are granted the access to resources and financial means that they need. So, two examples in Massachusetts are Elliott Human Resources Agency and the St. Francis House. Elliott offers a program for an assertive community treatment, which is basically designed to provide community based services for individuals with mental illnesses who definitely need more support but often refuse or don't want to abide by normal rules of treatment. So these kinds of services include everything we see here. So addiction services, therapeutic mentoring, community outreach, and so on. And the St. Francis House is known as a shopping mall of services to homeless people. The St. Francis House is actually in the Boston Common right by Emerson. So if you have time to go check it out, I highly recommend it. It's essentially a one stop service shop for homeless people in that it provides mental health and occupational guidance services all under one single roof. So it has food and daytime shelter and showers and access to medical care, as well as a whole health care clinic and 3 psychiatrists who will provide regular on site services and therapy on a daily basis. So, my questions for you are, what causes what? Do you agree with my findings in the research that I presented? Or do you think that poverty causes schizophrenia? Or do you think schizophrenia causes poverty? Furthermore, do you think that there's anything we can do to break this poverty and mental illness cycle? I'd also really like to know your thoughts on programs like Elliott or the St. Francis House that focus on community based treatment. And finally, what are some problems with community based treatment? If you think there are any, I'd be very interested in hearing them. So that's all I have for you. Lastly, are my citations. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you learned something new.